All right, we're about to dive into one of the most, well, haunting experiments of the 20th century. It's a story all about a utopia that spiraled into a total nightmare. So, what happens when paradise becomes a prison? That's the huge, kind of terrifying question we're tackling. I want you to just imagine a world with no predators, no sickness, and all the food you could ever want. Sounds perfect, right? But what if that very perfection actually held the seeds of its own destruction? Well, to even begin to answer that, we've got to go back in time. Back to the 1960s, to a world that was literally designed to be a paradise for mice. The man behind all this was an ethologist named John B. Calhoun. An ethologist, by the way, is a scientist who studies animal behavior. And Calhoun was wrestling with this massive idea, something that felt super relevant back then with cities booming and everyone talking about population growth. His question was actually pretty simple, but so deep. If you take away all of life's struggles, what's even left? And so, this is what he built. What you're looking at here is an aerial view of one of his rodent universes. The most famous one was called Universe 25. I mean, this thing was designed from the ground up to be a literal mouse paradise. Just look at that structure. It had multiple levels, private nesting boxes, specific spots for food and water. It was basically a perfectly planned city just for mice. And the conditions? Oh, they were perfect. I mean, absolutely perfect. We're talking unlimited food and water, complete protection from predators and any kind of disease. Even the climate was perfectly controlled. The whole setup was designed to comfortably hold up to 4,000 mice. So on paper, this was without a doubt the best place in the entire world to be a mouse. But, as you might have guessed, this paradise was about to take a very dark turn. Yeah, the Utopia, it didn't last. In fact, it became a kind of hell, one that the mice built for themselves. Okay, so let's walk through the timeline of how it all fell apart. It started with just 4 pairs of mice, the founding fathers and mothers of this new world. And for the first few months, things went pretty much as you'd expect. The population just exploded. But then, around day 315, something really weird started to happen. Even though there was still tons of physical space, their social world was becoming, well, pathologically overcrowded. By day 560, the population maxed out at 2,200 mice, way short of the 4,000 it was built for. And then, just 40 days after that peak, the decline started. It was a steep, irreversible fall, straight towards extinction. Calhoun himself wrote down the horrors he was seeing in his notes. This quote here, it's from his famous 1962 article in Scientific American, and it really gives you a chilling sense of what his team was witnessing day in and day out. This wasn't just a population crash, you see. It was a complete and total breakdown of what it even meant to be a mouse. And this is where things get really interesting, and frankly, pretty horrifying. Let's look at the specifics of this breakdown. You had mothers, who are normally super nurturing, right? Well, they started neglecting and even attacking their own babies. The males formed these aggressive gangs, just attacking anyone. And then you had this other group, Calhoun called them the beautiful ones. These were males who just completely checked out from society. They didn't fight, they didn't try to mate, they just ate, slept, and groomed themselves, completely isolated from all the chaos. The very glue of their society, social interaction, had just dissolved. And this number right here, it just perfectly illustrates the devastating cost of that social collapse. In the most chaotic parts of the enclosure, infant mortality hit a staggering 96%. 96! That means almost no baby mice survived to become adults. So here's the really crucial takeaway. The population didn't die out from starvation or disease or anything like that. They died out because they had literally forgotten how to be mice. The survivors, they were physically healthy, but they'd lost all the social skills they needed for things like, courtship, mating, raising their young. They were still alive, sure, but their society was totally extinct. Now, as you can probably imagine, a story this dramatic didn't stay locked up in the lab for long. Oh no, the story of Universe 25 got out, and it took on a life of its own. A lot of people started seeing it as a dark warning, a prophecy even, for humanity's future. So Calhoun came up with a name for what he was seeing. He called it the behavioral sink. It's this idea of a vortex, like a downward spiral of social decay that happens because of overpopulation. And it wasn't just about physical crowding. It was what he called social density, just too many interactions, too much pressure, all leading to this total collapse.
And he took it even further than that, framing the whole collapse in almost philosophical terms. He called it a spiritual death. Think about it. The mice had everything they needed to live, but they had lost everything they needed to live for. Without any challenges, without a purpose, without any reason to strive for anything, their social spirit just died.
And man, did that idea hit a nerve. Back in the 60s and 70s, people were really worried about a human population bomb. They were concerned about cities falling apart, rising crime, and suddenly Calhoun's mice became this powerful, terrifying metaphor for all those anxieties. It even inspired dystopian movies like the classic Soylent Green. But is it really a prophecy? I mean, really? In the decades since this all happened, scientists have taken a much more critical look at Universe 25, and they're asking some tough questions about whether it's really a prediction of our future at all. This really lays it all out. On the one hand, you've got Calhoun's big conclusion: overcrowding causes social collapse. Simple. But on the other hand, modern critics are pointing out some pretty serious problems. For one, this experiment has never been successfully repeated. Never. They also point out that the totally artificial, inescapable environment could have been the real cause of all the stress. Some even think poor sanitation and disease might have been a factor. And of course, here's the biggest one. Humans, we aren't mice. We have culture, we have technology, we can adapt in ways rodents just can't. In fact, when a psychologist named Jonathan Friedman actually tried to test this stuff on humans back in 1975, his results were completely different. He put student volunteers into really high-density living situations and found no major negative effects on their stress or aggression. I mean, that directly challenges this whole idea that you can just draw a straight line from Universe 25 to a city like New York or Tokyo. You know, this quote from science writer Sam Keen just sums it up perfectly. He says Universe 25 is kind of like a Rorschach test, one of those ink blot tests. People see what they want to see in it. Some people look at it and see a chilling prophecy of urban decay and overpopulation. But others, they see a flawed experiment that tells us a lot more about our own fears than it does about our actual destiny. So what about Calhoun himself? Well, it turns out that the popular story, the one about inevitable doom, that was only half his message. He actually believed that humanity, with all our creativity and cleverness, could see these dangers coming and actually design a better future. He wasn't some prophet of doom. He was trying to sound an alarm, a warning so that we could get to work building a better world. Which really leaves us with this final, crucial question. When you look into the abyss of Universe 25, what do you see? Is it a peek into an inevitable dystopian future that's waiting for us? Or is it just a mirror reflecting the fears and anxieties we already have about our modern world? Well, that debate is still very much alive.